You mentioned earlier Pinterest Assistant, which is our conversational AI model that allows users to have a new modality on Pinterest, which is voice. They can talk to the assistant and get great ideas, discover great inspiration, and then do so in a way that's still visual first. And that's all powered by our taste graph, which is really the foundation of the entire experience you see on Pinterest today, which is our incredible user intent data that powers the platform.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining the Boardroom Club today to another episode. My name is Yossi Garmazi, and I'm joined also by a good friend of mine, Sanat Mouli. Sanat.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Matt, for being here. Super excited for this podcast.
So today we are fortunate enough to interview indeed none other than Matt Madrigal, CTO of a company you might have heard of as Pinterest, a company that transforms hundreds of millions of people, how they discover ideas, shop, and turn inspiration into real world actions. So Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks again for having me, guys. Yossi, Sanat, appreciate it.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all ours. So, Matt, I want to start with a very interesting question. A little bit before all your engineering roles that obviously been at the top, but funny enough, you started to work out of all places in Rico's Pizza. So I was just wondering if you can tell us one show at your early days that helped you at the end to manage an engineering organization in a place like Pinterest.
Yeah, see, I think this very specific chore is cleaning the floors. And here's why. Because when I was working at Rico's Pizza in Chico, California, my hometown, cleaning the floors was always the last thing you did. So I'd have to go through my list of all of the different things, clean the tables, the bussing the tables, the dishes. But when you clean the floors, it's very symbolic also of finishing everything you do. The details matter and you go end to end. That always really stuck with me. And frankly, thinking back in my career, even back in my days at Fanatics, one of the signs of a really well-run fulfillment center, if you go there during the busiest time, let's say the day after Cyber Monday, a well-run fulfillment center has clean floors because it's always the last thing you do. So that's the one
And
chore
last
that
thing you want as well, I guess.
That's right.
You mentioned also working at Fanatics. You worked also at Google and a merchant, William Sonoma. Was there any specific experience or maybe product theory that you needed to unlearn once you moved to a company like Pinterest? And specifically about Google versus Pinterest, how is technically different the search intent model at Google versus the discovery one at Pinterest?
Look, Google's good when you know exactly what you're looking for, but Pinterest is great when you're still trying to figure that out. And that really speaks to the heart of the consumer experience on Pinterest, which is about visual inspiration and discovery, because Pinterest is where intent is formed. And so you can look at our user base, which is more than half of our users are Gen Z. So what Gen Z wants is they want a visual, highly personalized experience that allows them to find ideas, discover them, and then when they're ready to, they can take action. And so whether it's things around fashion or home, these are things that are very unique to the Pinterest experience and really where visual and multimodal search is going.
Absolutely. And Pinterest, as you mentioned, is sort of like shifted to be a visual search and a shoppable content while leaning into vision language models, which is very revolutionary indeed with features and products like Pinterest Assistants. But how does AI change the way people at the end of the day move from inspiration to the last thing, which is the purchase?
Well, I think as you look at how Pinterest, how we've used AI, which is infused in all aspects of our consumer experience, as well as our ads platform, Yossi, and really what it's done is it's allowed us to personalize the experience better and then also meet the users where they are. Because recently, if you look at how, for example, search has evolved over the past couple of years, it's gone from maybe text-based search to much more conversational, natural language. But then what we really have always focused on is visual search, this idea of like multimodal search. So you mentioned earlier Pinterest Assistant, which is our conversational AI model that allows users to, have a new modality on Pinterest, which is voice. So with voice, they can talk to the assistant and get great ideas, discover great inspiration, and then do so in a way that's still visual first. And that's all powered by our taste graph, which is really the foundation of the entire experience you see on Pinterest today, which is our incredible user intent data that powers the platform.
100%. So you mentioned the taste graph, which is a great segue for the next question, because in this new era of multi-models. You have models all over the place, but how does Pinterest AI reconcile conflicting signals like, let's say, visual sales versus text searches, and at the end bring it to sort of like one signal about the customers or maybe segments of the population?
I actually view those as very complementary signals. What you mentioned around like visual saves versus text searches. And that's the amazing piece of having a multimodal platform, multimodal search, where you can save all that data in the same shared embedding space. And very specifically, as you think about the taste graph, and what the taste graph is all the incredible intent data you see on the platform today, which is all the great user information based on the hundreds of billions of pins that they saved, organized into more than 15 billion boards, and all the associations with what you mentioned earlier, text searches, visual searches, and that allows us to anticipate what a user's aesthetic or taste is. So for example, Sanat strikes me as like a mid-century modern guy. And so it's very hard to describe what that is through text, but Sanat would just know it when he sees it. And that's the power of what you can do with these signals in a multimodal environment.
And Sanat is also a very well-known CS guy, and we'll talk about it later on. But I was curious, now that we have all these models, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, so people looking for really one answer. They ask the model and they get the answer. So what do you think is the impact on visual discovery searches in platform like Pinterest?
The way these models and how users interact with them, I actually believe that it makes visual discovery and visual search even more relevant and important for a product and a platform like Pinterest. Now, AI can reduce, let's say, browsing for more routine tasks. Let's just take shopping, for example. So if you're shopping for things like your daily staples, paper plates, paper towels, etc., that's where I feel like certainly AI and agents can help reduce some of the browsing needs there. But when it comes to visual search, and what's always made Pinterest special is so often that, for example, you don't know your taste, but you know it when you see it. And so that's very difficult to describe through some natural language prompt, through like a ChatGPT or maybe a Gemini, but through Pinterest, through visual discovery. That's something that's always been core to the platform. And you mentioned shopping. The number one use case for why people come to Pinterest is to shop. So over half of our users come here to shop, and visual search powered by different models we leverage are what really makes that experience so relevant and why our users continue to grow for 10 quarters in a row.
That's incredible. And maybe a follow-up about that, it's sort of like the social search, right? When people search about something, okay, there is the Google, there is all the chatbots themselves, but there is also when you, let's say, enter Facebook or Instagram and just search for something that you want to buy. And a lot of people going to search for their things on social platforms. What do you think going to be the impact of this one, specifically on Pinterest, that let's say in the next 12 to 24 months?
Search has been fragmenting for quite some time now. Even for the last 3 years, you see the rise of different user modalities, again, moving from text-based search more to natural language through, again, these chat bots. And so I always talk about this as like this Cambrian moment, this evolutionary moment where you have this explosion of all these different means to search for different information needs. But this is actually where I believe that Pinterest is very uniquely positioned, because this is an area where search is going specifically for our Gen Z users. Again, half of our users are Gen Z. In fact, there's an Adobe study that talks about how 39% of Gen Z prefer to come to Pinterest to search before even Google. And
Really?
so
Wow.
so this is a really interesting proof point. So if you look and you talk to Gen Z, you ask them, well, why is that? Well, a lot of it is because they want to be part of a visual search, really a user journey that's highly visual, personalized. They want to be able to express their own creativity in that journey. And that's where, when we think about personalized visual discovery, we're really well set up, because with our user base, but also because, Gen Z, they're trendsetters, right? So a lot of what Gen Z does is what other generations will do later. And so we think that these more vertical search experiences like Pinterest, because Pinterest, if you look at like some of our big categories, whether it's home or beauty or fashion, these are experiences that are very optimized and great for users on the platform today.
Okay, so you got Pinterest visual search, but interestingly enough, you also moved to other area and expanded because you actually did the tvScientific acquisition. It was fascinating in a way because Pinterest entered into connected TV. But why enter CTV now, and what makes your approach different from other competitors in the market?
Connected TV is a huge, really fast growing area in the advertising industry. And frankly, we look at our partnership and having tvScientific join the family is very similar to what they offer to what we've built our ad platform today, which is really the full funnel, upper funnel, inspiration, discovery, and then the actionability. Because what tvScientific brings to the table that's unique compared to, let's say, traditional TV is that traditional TV is very difficult. You can't really measure the actionability based on the influence from what you saw on that ad on TV. But connected TV through tvScientific is different because you can actually measure the conversions in that respect. And so that's where, in fact, we just announced tvScientific by Pinterest, which is our first expansion into connected TV. And the technology is very unique where you can measure both the reach as well as the task completion, the conversion. And we have some early tests that show some really great results. And so one of our partners, LG, they expanded their audience with tvScientific by Pinterest by showing a 73% increase in unique households reached. But then also it drove a 24% lift in net new customers. And so this is just an initial proof point of what we're going to be able to offer for our great advertising partners with this new integration.
That's definitely a new set of tools for all of your clients. And it's interesting time, as I mentioned, because you sit on the chair of the CTO of a large organization, obviously very important one in our generation for the Gen Z, of course. But I guess when there is the AI and people talk about quantum, people talk about this technology and that technology, you need at the end of the day to do some, I don't know, like a budget allocation in order to say, no, I want to expand to this, I want to expand to this area. How do you think about budget allocation? Because obviously Pinterest, you got the money, but still you need to allocate it wisely enough in order to not to stay behind. So how do you think about it?
I think big picture, a big fan of the budget allocation because it drives focus. And the focus really speaks to the priorities that you have, not just as a team, organization, but really for the company. And so from an R&D perspective, Yossi, big areas of focus for us continuing our investment specifically on the next generation of what personalization on the platform looks like, because that's why users come to us, for that personalized visual discovery, but then also investing in our conversational AI models. You mentioned Pinterest Assistant earlier, which is our voice modality that allows you to have a conversation with Pinterest to explore and find your style and when you're ready to make a purchase with the pins that you like. And so these are a couple of the areas that we're heavily investing in, all powered by our taste graph and really what makes Pinterest unique, specifically on that first party data that helps us deliver such a great user experience. But with that is just a really significant investment in open source models and fine tuning after that. And so that's really what powers Pinterest Assistant.
It's all about the UX to make the customers happy, right? But I guess there is some times where there is some friction, right? Between, let's say, from the customer experience journey between saving an idea to complete the purchase. What do you see as the biggest friction from your standpoint?
I'd say that the big friction point at Yossi that we continue to work on is any time a user goes from inspiration discovery and then ultimately to the purchase. And so the last few years, we've really worked hard to make Pinterest, the platform, more shoppable. Pinterest has always been fantastic for inspiration and discovery. But when our users find something they love, whether they do a close up, whether they create a board, like for me, I use boards as really shopping wish lists for my wife and my 3 kids. And so when users find something that they want to purchase, something that they love, we want to make sure that that experience is seamless going from Pinterest all the way through to one of our retailer or advertiser partners and help them not only discover what they're looking for through their taste. Remember, we talked about Sanat being a mid-century modern guy. So if he finds something that he really loves, like he's redoing his living room and a sofa that he likes, we want to make that experience and that user journey as seamless as possible.
You are also the first mover of tech shopping, right? And I've heard you are referring to as the OG of e-commerce, something like that, right?
Well, I now you're dating
I've
myself.
done my homework.
Yeah. I'm dating myself, Yossi. But look, I've had the good fortune of being in shopping my entire career, even dating back to, gosh, the first .com boom in my time at eBay starting in 2001 till today. So seen lots of different cycles. And the one thing that's always consistent, though, is you always got to focus on the consumer problems. And now the technology changes that. Certainly AI does that. It enables great experiences. And that's where we infuse that in everything we build at Pinterest.
100%. And something very interesting that I wanted to ask you is about Pinterest Predict 2026, fascinating report that highlight how consumers moving away from trend fatigue to personal exploration. But how is Pinterest ML specifically evolving to support individualized discovery instead of just the global trends out there?
Pinterest has always been about individualized discovery because people don't come to Pinterest to see what everybody else is doing. They come to Pinterest to really discover themselves. And so this is how we're evolving our ML models and then our recommendation systems to really focus on what a user wants to do next, specifically trying to anticipate what they want to do next. And that's really the big shift for us. And to bring this to life, if you look at like old or call it traditional recommender systems, whether it's things around like collaborative filtering, where if you like this, then you'll like that. That's something that's very common that you see that's actually still quite effective. But where we're taking this is much more about anticipating what the user needs. So to bring this to life on Pinterest, if you're looking for, let's say, a fire pit, maybe it's a DIY project for a fire pit in your backyard. Instead of seeing a lot of fire pits, you'll see relevant ones, but then also you're going to start to see in your home feed recommendations for s'mores recipes or backyard grilling, or maybe that big spring party planning that you're going to have to welcome in the nice weather. And this is really what our recommender systems are evolving to focus on things that are deeply rooted in, called user interest clusters, and really detailed persona building, anticipating what the user wants to do next. And this is what our users come to Pinterest for, is discovery for things that they didn't even realize they were interested in.
It's all about personalization and take it with AI to the next level. And then, Matt, I got a bunch of more questions, but Sanat here is also a fascinating one to ask you. So I thank you so much. And Sanat, without further ado, the floor is yours. Take us home.
Thank you, Yossi. Thank you, Matt, for being here. I know you mentioned the mid-century modern guys, really, really cool aesthetic. I searched it up on Pinterest. Curious to know, are these pictures sort of AI generated? How much of these would you say when you do a search comes from like AI generated layer of the images?
The power of Pinterest is human curation. And so when you think about AI or Gen AI content, we always look at it in the broader context of content quality. So just going back to, we always want to make sure that our pinners have the most personalized, engaging experience that we can show them. Now, we don't look at Gen AI content, Sanat, as inherently bad. If there's content that's Gen AI generated that's irrelevant or that has fakes or spammy, we're going to downrank that or take that off the platform. But broadly speaking, we're really focused on two things. Firstly is transparency, and the second is control in that broader context of content quality. So first on transparency, we are one of the leaders as it relates to tagging pins that are Gen AI generated as such. And so there is, some Cornell research that was done that talked about Pinterest and another platform as being the leaders there. So it's something that we invest in quite heavily, is the transparency around Gen AI labels. And then secondly, it's controls. So if users want to see more or less AI generated content, they can go to their preferences and specify that in categories such as beauty, home, or fashion per se.
You guys do a lot of training work and you mentioned open source models. So I'm curious to learn more about your stack and how you tie in all your training work and what models you use.
So it's not big picture. We love the use of open source models because we can do so in a way where we can customize the weights to drive a much better user experience for things that are very unique to Pinterest. And I mentioned multimodal search, and I'll come back to the major use case we're using here. And then the other piece is cost. So we've been able to use open source models, if we've scaled it, at the tune of 90% lower cost than calling a proprietary third-party model. So If you're on the platform today, I mentioned Pinterest Assistant, which is our conversational AI shopping assistant, and that's powered by what we call Navigator One. And Navigator One is our conversational AI model that's a base model that uses Qwen3 VL that's post-trained with our taste graph. And what's really unique about this is that what's great about a model like Qwen3 VL is that because we're able to customize the weights, what we were able to do is bring our own multimodal and specifically visual embeddings. And so we're able to take out the visual encoder because this is something that is so unique to Pinterest that allows us to get great visual similarity, great recommendations. And by bringing our own embeddings, we're able to pre-compute all of the images that we have. And so it just allows us to, at inference time, perform much, much better. And so that's what you see. That's the model that powers the Pinterest assistant behind the scenes.
It sounds like there's a lot of work that's done to maintain trust and quality, and there's a lot of cost management as well. In terms of, I guess, non AI technology, what excites you over the next decade regarding like Pinterest and some of the trends that you see?
As far as non-AI technology, I'll tell you the thing I'm most fascinated by technology-wise is really energy and specifically clean energy, like the energy that's needed to power all these data centers. We talked about resource allocation and optimization. I'm always looking at our investment in GPUs and compute, but at a much more foundational layer, as you think about this infrastructure and data center build out, it's all about the power that drives these data centers, allows you to have massive compute. So I'm very interested in sources of clean energy, even nuclear energy to power these. So to me, that's very fascinating.
Of course. And so in terms of, powering AI, what do you think is the best way to build these data centers and what's the best source of energy you'd say?
Well, it's probably a little bit outside of my expertise, but I think that a lot of the investment now around just continuing to optimize for clean energy, and you see all the hyperscalers do this, and I think that's fascinating. And then again, some of the alternative forms of power and energy they're looking at, I think are going to be critical because certainly the demand for compute is not going away. It's going to continue to grow exponentially.
Maybe data center in space. I don't know.
Yeah, I heard about that. A little better cooling, I guess, but yeah.
Very cool. And so I guess kind of moving more to a little bit more on the personal question side of things, in terms of advice, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are building companies today?
Yeah, number one piece of advice is if you have an idea, just build, right? Like I feel like you hear about market research and look, I'm not saying those things are important, but there's never been a better time to build like these coding IDEs. I mean, anybody can build an app of super powerful frameworks. So I would just say get your hands dirty and just get started.
Makes sense? Who's been your most impactful mentor? And what is one lesson that, you still carry from them throughout your journey all the way to Pinterest?
I've been really lucky. I've had wonderful mentors my whole career, but certainly my top mentor, I'd say, is my dad. My dad is a retired computer science professor, over 32 years, chairman of computer science at Chico State. And he always taught me to like bet on myself. And so a lesson learned, I'm going to give a Michael Jordan quote because I'm a big sports fan, which is you miss every shot you don't take, which is if you see an opportunity, take a risk, just go for it. Like what's the worst that can happen? Someone says no, or maybe you fail, but you learn something.
Nice, nice. And then we heard that you also have a Gen Z daughter who's an engineer. Has that kind of changed the way you run Pinterest, or you view the world and you see trends regarding the direction and what you're taking at Pinterest?
Absolutely. I think that I always think about as you build a product, especially a consumer product, the people building the product should mirror your users, right? So we have Gen Z users. I have my daughter's a Gen Z forward deployed engineer. And so one thing it's really helped shape my thinking around is like this whole AI native generation of engineers who really understand like how using Codex, Claude, Cursor, like how fast they are and how creative they are with those tools. And it just allows much faster throughput experimentation. And certainly that's how a lot of the thinking I have shaped around like engineering organizations and how you scale. Certainly, talking to her and watching her operate has been a big influence there.
Absolutely. Life outside of work. What hobbies or passions you pursue outside of work? And tell us more about that.
Well, look, outside of work, I love traveling. And I mentioned I married my high school sweetheart. I have 3 kids. And so we love traveling with them. In fact, we had a great trip to Japan during the winter holiday. And so cherry blossoms, some really cool street food, and then also a bunch of Shiba Inus that we saw there. So that was been a lot of fun.
If you weren't leading large tech platforms, what would you be doing instead?
I'd probably be a professor. Both of my parents were retired university professors. I mentioned my dad, who taught computer science. My mom taught women's studies and sociology at Chico State, which is my hometown. So I'd probably be a professor.
That's really cool. Thank you so much for doing this. Yossi, I'll pass it on to you for the final question.
So one last question before we wrap it up. This is the hardest one of them all. So what is your favorite movie of all time?
Favorite movie all time, I'd say the original Top Gun. You always love a comeback story like Maverick. So definitely Top Gun.
Did you like the last one, the new one?
Oh, I love the new one too. Yeah, I'm waiting for the third one to come out. So yeah, big Top Gun fan.
the third one and maybe the fourth, but you never know with Hollywood. So Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been a joy. We learned so much. And for everybody else in the audience, so stay tuned. We have other amazing episodes from the president and chief product officer of Cisco, the president of ServiceNow. So it's going to be interesting. Stay tuned.